Welcome back to 1600. Today, the White House focused on the war against al-Qaeda, but for weeks, we've been telling you about the hallowed grounds related to that war, Ground Zero in New York City. Nearly 8 years after the 9/11 attacks, the site remains a symbol of bureaucratic bungling, delay, and surrender. The site remains mostly a big hole. And while some work has been done on the proposed Freedom Tower base, the entire plan is one that most 9/11 families detest. Last night on the show, several 9/11 families pleaded with President Obama to get involved. They want the president to take a tour of the site and look at some models for an alternative plan that city officials refused to consider, a plan that would stop the Freedom Tower and rebuild the Twin Towers instead, taller, stronger, and safer. We promised to follow up with the Obama White House, and we have. After all, the president has repeatedly spoken about the importance of his office tackling the tough issues and making difficult decisions. Today, NBC's Chuck Todd tried to help us get an answer about Ground Zero at the White House press briefing. Chuck posed the crucial question to spokesman Robert Gibbs.
Some 9/11 fan had asked the president to get involved with the rebuilding at Ground Zero and some of the delays.
I will check on that. That is not on my stuff either, but I will have somebody work on that.
This afternoon, we continue to follow up the White House, and late this afternoon, we received this statement from White House spokesman Bill Burton. Quote, "From the first days of this administration, we've had an open dialogue with the 9/11 families and the families of the victims of the USS Cole attack. We are familiar with their concerns and are willing to discuss them, but it appears that this is an issue that should be resolved by state and local government officials." Joining us now is Jim Riches, a retired chief for the New York City Fire Department. His son was also a firefighter and died on 9/11. Last month, Jim was part of a group of 9/11 families who met with President Obama at the White House to talk about Gitmo and was told by the president the families would always find an open line to the White House. Jim, what do you make of the White House response?
Well, I think they have a lot on their plate now with the economy and everything else. But, we as families here, it's a disgrace to America and my son and everybody that died that day. There's a hole in the ground. And they're talking about wasting $40 million a year on a museum. I think it ought to be looked at. Nobody's in charge down there. Nobody has taken the forefront to do anything. Mayor Bloomberg, the governors of New Jersey and New York, Patterson and Corzine, and I think it's a disgrace. We can't even get the ranks of the men, the firemen, the lieutenants and captains of the fire department on the memorial. And I find that hard to believe. And we have a general who's from the Pentagon that he won't even know who he is. His name will be on it. That's it. They ought to sit down. Somebody ought to step up and take charge. Or the Obama administration should tickle somebody's feet because the Port Authority and everything is getting done down there. And there's no one leader. We need one incident commander.
And in addition to sort of the whole issue of the memorial itself, it's going to be subterranean, as a lot of people have criticized and don't understand. There's also, of course, that issue with what was known as the Freedom Tower, which was the plan that was essentially forced by government officials. Nobody ever considered rebuilding the Twin Towers. And now the Freedom Tower, which has had a difficult time getting any tenants, the Port Authority has decided to rename it World Trade Center 1. And as we were talking last night, World Trade Center 1 was one of the Twin Towers. What do you make of that? And again, how does that strike you?
It strikes me as unusual. There's going to be no American flags down at this memorial that we're having. I think that's a disgrace. And I think for someone to change the name of the Freedom Tower shows their arrogance and their ignorance. And it's an insult to my son and all the others that died that day. I don't know, they don't want to be too American or what it is. But, this was an American tragedy. American heroes died that day, and they deserve the best down there. And, for us to waste all the money, we're looking for something simple and that will be respectful and it will be the right kind of tribute to our sons and the people that died that day. And hopefully someone will step up and take charge because right now there's no leader that's stepping up.
Jim, the White House did say that they are willing to discuss your concerns, although, of course, right now they're leaving it to state and local officials. Is there an effort then that's going to be made by 9/11 families to try to, talk directly to the White House?
Well, we're going to reach out and keep trying because we're not happy with what they're doing down there. And they've not listened to the families at all. And I think the Port Authority has just made their own decisions of what they want to do and has disregarded the governors and the people's word. They picked this Freedom Tower design, even though it wasn't the one that was selected. And I think it's outrageous, and we're upset, and we're going to continue to fight because our sons can't speak for themselves, so we'll speak out for them.
Jim Riches from the FDNY, whose son died on 9/11. And Jim, thanks again for coming on tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
For reaction to the White House approach on this issue and others, let's bring in our panel. Guy Lawson writes for Rolling Stone, and Chris Plant is a conservative radio talk show host on WMAL here in Washington, D.C. And Chris, what do you make of this?
You know, if you need, as he said, the White House to tickle their feet a little bit, maybe the White House should tickle their feet a little bit. It's a mess. You know, it should be a pretty straightforward effort. Obviously, there's too much government, too much bureaucracy. No Freedom Tower. For what reason? Maybe somebody else should be put in charge.
Guy, your view up in New York?
We're supposed to be entering this new age of responsibility. It seems to me that someone should be put in charge of this. I live in New York and see that hole all the time, and it's just really a disgrace.